Quarkus Insights, Episode 18, Spring the Quarkus Way, with special guest Georgios Andrinakis. Hey everybody, my name's Jason Green, and I'm here today with our special show for Quarkus Insights. I'll be your host, and joining me is a fantastic panel. We have Quarkus co-lead and co-founder Emmanuel Bernard. We have John Klingen here, who's the product manager on the Red Hat side for the Quarkus space and Java space, middleware space, microprofile.
Quarkus is a product.
The Quarkus space, right? Yeah.
Hey, I'm not the product PM.
Yeah, you're not the PM. You're just a product manager here who works on lots of different things. But what's your official? Which PM is it? Standards or?
I basically position it as, I do upstream community stuff in Quarkus quite a bit, and then I do a lot of time on microprofile and a bit on Jakarta EE as well.
Awesome. So I think this is a good segue. John, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, what I just said, and on top of that, I'm in Southern California, so we're all over the place, right? So I think that's mainly it. Microprofile, some Jakarta, a lot of Quarkus as well. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. And then, of course, we have show regular Georgios as our special guest. And Georgios, I know you've done the intro before about your background, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk a bit about, like your experience with Spring and how that came about and the things you've done with it and so on.
Oh, yeah. I thought you wanted to talk about the treadmill background.
Well, there's an interesting story about the treadmill. Like, my wife wanted it. I knew it would turn out to not be ever used, which is the case. No one ever uses it anymore. But the problem is, since we live in an apartment, someone has to come and take it. We're like on the 4th floor or something like that. So I would give it away if someone would just come and pick it up. So yeah, that's the story with the treadmill. So yeah, we just go to the gym, no treadmill.
So anybody in the Greece vicinity,
yeah, come by a treadmill. You'll be doing me a favor. It'll be a win-win situation.
Yeah, before we started the show, we were just talking to Georgios about how, would he be able to do the workout and demo at the same time? So maybe we'll try that sometime.
Well, I know what Ioannis from my team does that. Well, he basically he works on a treadmill. I mean, that's his routine now these days. He says it works great. I don't know. I haven't tried it.
Awesome. And Emmanuel, so obviously, founder of this show, so don't really need a huge introduction for you. But one thing I will say is people have been wondering why neither of us are on the show at the same time, so we can dispel the belief or the misconception or the myth.
We're not the same person. No, we just there's we got 2 masks, 2 people, 3 masks, so it's either Max, Jason, or I, but there is one dropping all the time. So there you go.
Excellent. So as a fun topic, I thought I'd ask everybody, and I'll start with you, John, because I'm feeling your story might be interesting. What was the first Java version you ever used?
I started developing Java the same night they released it because I saw an article pointing to a cartwheeling Duke inside the browser. I went and checked it out. It's like, oh my God, you could actually do, active content in the browser, and I was sold. So whatever day that was the day I started developing with Java.
Okay, so you wanted Flash, really, right?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's a question. Did that predate Flash?
Oh, yeah. I think so.
I thought it did.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. And then what about you, Georgios? What was the first version that you ever used?
I was actually kind of lucky because as a student, the first version I touched was 1.5. So there was already a ton of stuff in there, generics and everything. So yeah, I got pretty lucky not having to deal with the super old versions. So yeah, basically university, I started playing around with Swing a lot. I really enjoyed how I could actually be productive and like do all this cool graphical stuff and with like very little effort. I mean, that was crazy. We had started out with like C and everything like that, so like it was impossible to get anything done in that environment. So coming to Java for me was like, wow, I can actually be productive. I can do stuff like besides like stupid algorithms and stuff like that.
Cool. What platform are you guys using? Like what OS when you're doing your Java dev?
At university, it was basically probably like very early versions of Ubuntu. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's probably where I got it into it. I was probably using NetBeans back then. If I remember, either NetBeans or Eclipse back then. Not really sure.
So Milton's saying he's using 1.16.
I hope it didn't start with that. So
I hope he's not still using it.
Yeah. Hey, hold on, Milton. You're hiding my face. So
there we go. We'll cover for it.
So for me, I didn't quite start with that, but I was very next to a team that was doing, I think, the first implementation of like a very aggressive UI-driven application, and I'm having doubt now whether it was pre-swing or just with AWT, but they wanted everything graphic, so every button was actually an image, and they were running into a lot of garbage collector issues. So essentially, the app could run for 20 minutes. And then they had to shut it down, otherwise it would crash with out-of-memory exceptions anyway. So it was cool looking, but not very useful from that point of view.
That's awesome. So you're not sure which version that was. You think maybe?
Yeah, it might have been AWT because I think AWT has this fundamental flow around too many objects being created versus Swing, which shifted the padding, right?
So Marcus asks, what is an aggressive UI-driven application?
Well, aggressive in number of objects being created, therefore it would crash.
It was very, very intensive resource consumption thing.
No, it was aggressive in the sense that, the classic Java app has these default look and feels, right? The metal one, the native OS one, and I think people tend to use the native OS one these days. But before that, or native looking at least, but before that, you can technically replace every single element with some graphics, right? So the button wouldn't be an OK button, gray. It would literally be an image, and then you go for what you want. So that was good, but then very, very pricey in terms of leaked garbage collector objects or something.
And really sorry, Manuel, you're the one who's taking the brunt of the comment boxes.
Yeah,
right,
yeah, exactly.
Right over your face.
I demand a different position.
Yes. So my first experience was Java 1.1, and it was on Windows. And I remember the thing used to drive me crazy was the whole like buffered input stuff, like trying to read character data or file data. It had all these weird bugs on Windows. Because I think there was Spark was still kind of one of the most sort of biggest deployment environments for it, but there was the Linux Blackdown version I was using, and things worked pretty well there. So I was just like, I'm just going to use, Linux for most of the development stuff there. So that was kind of like my first heavy Java usage was actually Blackdown. So
it's funny that on Windows, people were going to this deep down graphical UI to change the environment variable for the class path. So at the time, we were like, there's only going to need one class path per system. And that's how I configured it until you end up realizing that's not the way I want to live going forward. And then you start to isolate your class paths between apps.
Yeah, I remember that because if you actually installed something that used Java, it would fight with your development environment.
Yeah, you would just put it in the front, like, class path, my class path, and then the other guy's class path down the line. Yeah.
Yeah. But it blew my mind that you could write like code that would run on the server, and then you could write code that would run in the browser. That was kind of a really, I know it's not the first instance of it, but it was still pretty awesome to see that in practice.
I guess you must be loving Node.js.
Yeah, exactly. I always think those technologies are really cool if they, ship and cover both sides. But in any case, before we get into our show, I just want to just do real quick sort of housekeeping. First of all, Quarkus Insights, we're all about giving you some updates about what's going on in the community, and then a deep dive into technology. So coming up soon, I know many of you are waiting on this. Come on, guys, let's get done with the chit chat and get right into Spring. We want to see how do we use Spring on Quarkus. So we'll get there, but real quick, I just want to mention that this show is only as interesting as you help us make it. So please comment and ask questions, and I will be sure to interrupt our guests. They love it when I do that with the questions. And then just to give you some quick news, Quarkus 1.8.1 is out. I was talking about 1.8, and then we were ready, and we all shipped 1.8. But then we found a really we had some sets of some fixes that came in that we thought were really important, so we tried to get around to you as quickly as possible and release 1.8.1. Like one specific one is that, we had a case where Jaeger was initializing even if you didn't use it, if it happened to be present as a module. So we've resolved that issue. And then also there's a bunch of other fixes, like we've got improved REST multi-part support. What do you think, guys? Am I missing anything? Any other really critical fixes in 1.8.1 that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, nothing really critical. I don't remember. I don't recall of anything critical being in there. So yeah, just the basic stuff is what you mentioned. I'm pretty sure. The other one's just garden variety bug fixes.
Cool.
Awesome. However, if you like to give us a hand, I think there is a plan for 1.9 with some changes around the platform, and Guillaume did ask for an early testing, so it's not there yet, but as soon as it's there, I think the Quarkus core, which is the pre-release before we do the actual proper release, will also include a bound representing the platform. And we need some testing because we did Alexei did some heavy changes, and we want feedback before it goes into, a proper public, wider public. So I forgot the dates. They were sent out to Quarkus Dev. I'll find that out. Keep going with the show.
All right, awesome. And Milton left a comment here about Flutter UI, and I'm not sure, he was probably replying in context to something else we're asking. So I'm not sure what that was in regards to. So Milton, if you want to say something later, if you were connecting that to something we were saying, or otherwise it sounds interesting. So why don't we go straight to Georgios then? Georgios, do you want to go ahead and walk us through
that,
Spring?
the tier 1 with the change I'm talking about is going to be October 7th, or that's the plan anyway. So to look around that time on Quarkus Dev. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, actually, you know what? Before I ask you to start jumping into things, Georgios, let me ask you a quick question, which is, so you're going to tell us about Quarkus and Spring. Why should you use Spring APIs on Quarkus? What would be the big reason to do that?
Okay, I'll give you a short answer, and then I'll turn it over to John for a better, more let's say, better words answer. So the way I see it, right, is that a lot of people already know Spring, and they know a lot of Spring APIs, and nobody really wants to have to ditch their existing knowledge, right? Everybody wants a free lunch. I mean, I love a free lunch. So if people can port their Spring knowledge to Quarkus, that'll onboard them a lot faster. That's like the main reason I see this being useful. I'm sure John has some better reasons as well.
I actually thought that was pretty good. It's really about people in the industry with existing sets of knowledge being able to get quickly started with Quarkus, right? So they can, learn Quarkus quickly, pick up other APIs as well, whether it's mixing in, microprofile or a couple of, Java EE APIs, which they already do, right? Like JPA and stuff. So I think that's a lot of it. It's less about porting existing applications, although there are people that have been doing that, right? Like, who's doing the pet clinic? Someone's doing the pet clinic. I can't remember. So there are people porting existing applications over as well, but that's not really the design center. Yeah.
But it's also because it's good, right? So it's Like I made a comment, like, French don't go for free lunch, they go for good lunch, right? But it also means it's because the lunch is good on that side. So there are benefits. It's not just because you use the Spring API that it's good enough, right? It has to bring value.
No, that's an excellent point, basically. So we really wanted to make this like a first class experience, right? So if you use Spring APIs, you automatically get everything else that's already in the Quarkus ecosystem. Like John mentioned, you can mix it with all the other awesome APIs we have. You can use the dev mode. Everything works on native GraalVM, so you can compile everything you use down to native. So everything that makes Quarkus awesome in all the other ways, you can take advantage of with Spring APIs.
Yeah, and is there any kind of like cost associated? Like if I use the Spring versions versus the say micro profile APIs, is that mean I have to like pay more in that experience?
No, that's a question we get a lot actually. No, you don't pay anything because we basically don't. We made this choice like to not try and run Spring proper on Quarkus. What we try to do, and what we've done basically, is to take the Spring APIs either as in the form of annotations or the form of like interface we need to implement, and we implement them in a Quarkus native way. So that means like a very little reflection. We do build time, as much build time processing as possible. So all the great stuff you get with all the other Quarkus APIs, you get them with Spring APIs as well, because we've done the same sort of work, right? It's not like just a hack that we did in like a weekend or something like that and trying to get something working. No, it's building on all the primitives, all the awesome primitives that Quarkus itself has.
So I have a quick question in that regard. Sorry, Jason, I'm kind of taking or
go for it. This is what it's all about, right? We want to have a sort of a dynamic environment here. Go for it.
So is a lot of that basically annotation mapping under the hood, like AutoWired maps to @inject? And I know there's some cases where there's like glue code. Is that an accurate description, do you think, of what's really going on? Or is this, how would you describe it?
It's an accurate description for one of the modules, right? It's the Spring Dependency Injection module, as a large part of its code base is exactly what you described, right? Yeah, because a lot of the concepts from Spring Dependency Injection map to CDI one-to-one. So basically, a very large part of that code base for the dependency injection module only is doing that. However, when you move to the other modules, then that's not an accurate description. Because like when you do Spring Data JPA, what Spring Data JPA is that like you just define an interface and somebody has to implement it, the platform. So in that case, what we do is that we generate implementations for the interfaces under the hood. For Spring Web, we have custom hooks into our REST layer, which is REST Easy, which has been used for Wildfly and all that other stuff. It's our JAX-RS implementation. So we have hooks into that to make REST Easy understand the Spring annotations. For other stuff like security, then again, it needs to tie into the Quarkus hooks, Quarkus security hooks, same for caching. So like some of it is annotation mapping, but not most of it isn't. Most of it is like tying into the existing systems that provide like the base layer functionality.
Is that because Spring has different defaults, or why do you need some hook in place for some of those?
For REST Easy, for example, REST Easy is tied to the JAX-RS annotations, right? So we added some hooks into REST Easy in order to make it understand Spring annotations and map like the Spring concepts to JAX-RS, and also we have to generate some stuff on the Quarkus side. So like if you take the jar, we generate and open it up, you'll see a bunch of internal stuff in there that makes it that's needed in order to interact with Quarkus. Obviously, there is some of the default stuff you're talking about. So yeah, sometimes we need to like generate code that changes the defaults or that sets REST easy properties to make that happen. So basically, yeah, it's all sorts of code that is needed to make this make this a natural Quarkus API, right?
So like it looks like Max is commenting. I didn't know. So Max, if you want, you could jump in.
No, because we hear like wood chopping.
Oh, he is actually chopping wood. I thought he was speaking figuratively there. Okay. So yes, we have matching. If you look really carefully, they're actually different. But like John's,
you had matching.
There, solve that problem.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that Santa Monica Pier.
That is Huntington Beach. That's my hometown. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Cool.
All right. So
okay. So yeah. Let's. Sorry, man. Yeah. Let's see
some. It's been a long time. See no code.
Oh, no code. Well, I was hoping that I could get by without any code. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, look at that. We're out of time, guys.
Okay, so let's share my screen, and hopefully this time it won't freeze on me. Right. Okay, so how do you start, basically, right? There's, like with any Quarkus project, there's a couple ways to start. The graphical way is, of course, to go to code.quarkus.io. You go down here to this compatibility section, and you get Spring-related extensions. So you add those. If you add like Spring Web or whatever, it'll generate all the stuff you need for a Spring application. So I've already done that. So I'm not going to go ahead and do that. The other way was, of course, to do our create the project with our command line, which for now is a Maven plugin, but hopefully we'll have some more updates on that soon. So let's say I've already done that, right? What I see is that immediately, because I have Spring Web dependency, because I checked that earlier, what I did is that what Quarkus did is it created a Spring controller for me instead of a JAX-RS resource. Because obviously if I'm choosing Spring Web, then we're making the call that, yeah, I'm probably going to want to write in Spring Web instead of a JAX-RS. So then you get started just like you would with any other Quarkus application, Quarkus Dev, right? So it starts up and it should, let's see, hello. So it's just returning hello like any other Quarkus application would. And I'll show you that obviously the dev mode works. Oh man. Okay, so dev mode works. Just like I said earlier, we wanted to make this the natural Quarkus experience, right? So you don't have to think about anything else because you're using Spring. You just think that you're using Quarkus. So dev mode works. And how else does it work? It works, for example, if I go ahead and add a greeting here. Let's say private file string message constructor getter get message, and then I'm going to return some JSON here. So I'm going to go new greeting hello, and it just returns JSON. So because Spring uses like JSON as the default when you're returning an object, so here as opposed to JAX-RS, we don't have to add the produces JSON here. We just return the object and it'll be marshaled out to JSON by default. So like, yeah, that's cool. So let's see some more Spring dependency injection annotations. What we would do, usually to move our business logic, would be to like say we're like a greeting service, and we're going to use Spring's service stereotype annotation. And I'm going to be kind of lazy here and just copy this whole thing. Let's say hi, so we can make sure that it's different. And in the Spring world, we like to use the constructor injection a lot, which we can obviously use in Quarkus as well. But you'll see a lot of our tutorials sometimes don't mention this, so I like to bring this up whenever possible. That constructor injection in Quarkus just works, and you don't even need to have like the AutoWired or inject annotation here. You can just leave it out because there's a single constructor. So obviously Quarkus knows how to inject this thing.
Hey Georgios,
Yeah.
I was just wondering. So you're just talking about AutoWired,
Yeah.
and so is that so that's like a Spring injection annotation how does that compare with, say, a CDI injection annotation, and what's happening here? Like, which one's being used?
It's the exact same thing, right? The concepts are exactly the same. So Spring's like native annotation is AutoWired, right? Which is the same thing as saying inject, and basically Spring itself even supports the use of inject. So if you like use Spring Boot, you can use inject everywhere instead of AutoWired. Now, when it comes to Quarkus and when you're using AutoWired, what we do under the hood is that we tell our dependency injection engine, which is Arc, that this AutoWired thing basically maps to inject. So that's all there is to it. So that when John was talking about are we mapping annotations, then in this case, yes, this is an example of us doing exactly that. That since the concept is exactly the same, we're mapping the AutoWired to inject. And of course it works because this greeting service here, I told it, I made it a bean, basically. In CDI terms, this would be a bean. It would be exactly the same as if I annotated it with singleton. So if I don't do anything to service, so Spring's annotation, the service annotation, would basically map to a CDI singleton. And let's see what happens basically if I don't inject, if I don't annotate it at all with singleton, right? If I go ahead and refresh, then Quarkus will give me this awesome error message that will say that, you know what, I tried to inject the greeting service into the greeting controller because that's what you wanted me to do. But I don't have a bean that's named greeting service. And I obviously don't in this case because I purposely disabled the annotation. So if I annotate it again, then everything just works. Oh, I said hi here, so I wasn't really using it. So I'll go greeting service greet. If I refresh, hi. Right, so that's like the basic. That's like the very basic idea. So if you look at this code, it's just Spring code, right? You don't see any CDI annotations. You don't see any weird like have to write any glue code or anything else. It's just Spring code like you would normally use. So at this point, do we have any questions or anything, or should I continue?
Yeah, so let me just do a quick call out reminder to the audience that if you have any questions about anything Georgios is showing, feel free to type them in anytime, and we'll get his answers.
Question, actually. So you said, it's just Spring code, so, your team will feel very much at home. But then I see this big Quarkus banner, so, can I replace it with a Spring banner?
Yeah, actually I can. That's a good idea. Let me see if I can Spring Boot banner. Okay, use custom banners. Well, I'm just trying to. I'm trying to find a banner that will actually. I just want to copy paste the Spring banner, but I'm probably not gonna find that now. Oh, sorry, wrong button. So I could just go here, Quarkus banner, path default txt. So I could add a file here.
So my hat's off to Nander here for checking out the Spring extension source code. That is, in fact, the best way to learn about extensions in general, how to write your own extensions, is to look at the ones we have, or to learn about Quarkus architecture. The Spring ones are a great one to look at just because it touches everything. But yeah, I just want to bring that. Sorry, I interrupted, Georgios. Just thought it was a cool comment.
No, that's a great idea. Actually, that comes up a lot in our like Zulip chats and stuff like that. People will ask a question like, okay, like, how does this work, or why does this work, or why does this not work? And it's obviously it's obviously really helpful for us to help out. But sometimes like we're not available or whatever. So if people and I also found this out when I was like in my previous jobs when I wasn't working on open source. I found that after I had put like a significant investment into like learning a code base, or at least learning the basics of a code base, then I could get answers a lot faster, right? Just by looking up the source code. So that's an awesome comment right there. So back to Emmanuel's thing about the banner. So if I had a Spring banner here, if someone like copy pasted me a link of where the Spring banner is, banner file, then I could just paste it in here in this default banner txt file, and you see that it printed Spring Boot here. If I had the regular banner, then it would print the Spring banner. So that's a lot of fun. Everyone loves playing with banners, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I have a challenge for anybody who's listening to the show. Come up with a cool banner and maybe share it on the comment, and maybe we'll feature it in the next show.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, everyone loves playing with those. And
well, you know, we had this idea of like shifting the banner for every version of Quarkus, which I don't think we ended up doing, because we had this. Oh, there you go. My webcam is just burning out. You can still hear me, I think. So we had so much trouble finding the right banner that in the end we said, okay, let's just shift it every version, so at least it's easy enough. But maybe we should actually do that, like have a new banner every time we do a new version, like slightly different style or whatever. That'd be nice. Not adding a lot of value, mind you, but
community contributed banners. Like send us a banner, we'll put it in every
Excellent. So we got a bunch of questions queued up here. So first question is the Jackson serialization, deserialization, Quarkus implementation affected in some way if using the Spring APIs? So you kind of touched on that. You want to expand?
Yeah, sure. Basically what we do, so if you've used like Jackson in Quarkus without Spring stuff, you usually have to go ahead and like add something like Quarkus Rest Easy Jackson, right? And what that does is basically under the hood, it brings in Quarkus Jackson and then some extra glue code to make Rest Easy work with Jackson. In this case, what we've opted to do with the Spring extension is the Spring Web extension is that to include Jackson by default. That's done because, like, at least in my experience and the experience of the people I worked with in my previous jobs, was that like everyone that used Spring automatically used Jackson. It was like the de facto standard. So we bring that in automatically. But any configuration you do to Jackson, basically through our what we call a Jackson customizer or something like that. Oh no, object mapper customizer. So we have this in Quarkus. We have this notion of the object mapper customizer, which basically you declare a CDI bean that can customize Jackson's object maps in any way, and that is reflected automatically on the Spring extension as well. So it's just natural. It ties in the same way as it would with any other Quarkus extension.
So another question we have is about, when you're using mapping annotations, do they have a long-term impact on maintenance?
Maintenance for whom? For us or for whoever's writing the application? If we're talking about you folks writing applications, then no, because it's just like you're using your Spring mapping annotations instead of JAX-RS. It's just maybe more annotations or less annotations depending on the use case. But ultimately, it's just pretty much the same, right? For us, yeah, it obviously has a cost because the Spring Web annotation extension and all the other extensions we need to maintain. But that you don't have to be troubled by that. We do all the work for you.
Right. Yeah. And the nice thing is that it allows you to sort of, if you have different parts of your application at different phases of development, you can use Spring technologies in some areas and use other frameworks and technologies in the other areas. The challenge we would have had if we would have just sort of included Spring directly, well, there's a number of things, but which will lead to the next question. But but one of the big ones is being able to intermix these technologies. So that's a big reason we went that route. And that'll bring me to the next question.
Before you move to the next question is,
sure.
I think. Sorry, I think I'm losing my train of thought here. Yeah, the thing is that, Spring is relatively backward compatible, for the basic things. So for us, it's not that much work. It's like, yes, we're missing maybe one annotation behavior, and then we would add it, like we'll treat it as a bug and go and fix it for you, or you come with a pull request. If they start to rethink entirely how they do their Spring, annotations, or because of one change or another, then you're back into you having to learn those new annotations, and then that's a fair question to say, do I just switch back for the love of switching back since I'm on Quarkus? Or do I want to stay on the native Quarkus ones, or rather the de facto ones versus this conversion layer?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and pitch this question to you, Emmanuel, since you've got the floor. So what about Spring? We've been seeing some news that Spring is, adding some support for native images. The question is how do you guys feel about, the big competitor in this new scene?
Well, about time. About time for them.
Wait a minute. I thought native images were bad. Didn't they say?
Exactly.
Didn't they say they were bad? Oh,
no,
maybe not.
No.
Go on.
So it's good, and if you pay close attention to their progress, you see that there is a lot of work done and a lot of work still going. The way I see things is Quarkus has been designed and the ecosystem is from the ground up supporting GraalVM native. So it's not like okay, you can use Quarkus, but then if you use that extension, then everything blows up, right? If it blows up, then it's considered a bug for us, and we go and fix it. It's going to be a very difficult journey for Spring to go along those lines. And the other part is, compare the actual numbers, and please constrain your image. So if you use those images to be really efficient in memory usage and startup time and so on, but it's usually in a container style environment or something like that. So don't just test it on your machine with 32 cores and then 32 gigs of RAM. So make the right constraint, and then look not only at the startup time but also the time to first request. So I think we do have a page, maybe we can show it live, where we actually show the how we measure things and what we look at. So it's the time to first response that we care about, because that's the typical example of a a function, right? A function you call, you get the results, and then you stop paying for it, right? So what you care about is not so much how fast it starts and do nothing. It's like how fast it's done with the job, and for that if we're really happy about the numbers and the performance and the architecture we have to make that happen. I think I wanted to mention another point. Oh yes, native is one part of Quarkus. So people come at Quarkus for the native image, but we see them stay for other areas. In particular, John was mentioning the live coding. So people stay for the live coding, whereas they enjoy the native image. There is a lot more in Quarkus than just native image. We're starting to have the command line mode. There is Qt, which is this essentially build time template generator that is then therefore very memory efficient, can have reactive binding and so on. So these are innovation we're piling up on top of Quarkus. We're just not resting on our laurels with just having native image. There is a lot of additional values people have on top of Quarkus.
Yeah, well, I'm going to actually add to that a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think most users today still run their production applications on the JVM, right? And Quarkus in JVM mode still has, I think, significant improvements over most Java runtime stacks because of the way we do compile time boot, the way we pre-scan everything, the way we basically have static initializers running bytecode from the start, right? So I think people want to do native, but their environments are currently set up to do JVM, right? So you kind of have to haggle probably with the ops team to do this, but we'll get there, right? As an industry, we'll get there.
Yeah,
sorry, another one I forgot is, and Georgios would yell at me if I wasn't, is Quarkus package dash p native, and you're done.
I was waiting for you. I was waiting for you guys to finish.
I know, I forgot the obvious. So that's the developer joy and the ease of use. So that's the only stuff you have to write to actually get your native image executed. I think that's different at the moment from our competition.
Yeah, and I just want to add to one thing, sort of kind of sum up all these pieces together. One of the things to think about is just that the way in which Java applications worked classically, like in a lot of these sort of traditional legacy frameworks, is it's very centered around dynamic code running on a server, right? So like bare metal server, you've got your code, you redeploy your application, and there's all those costs are associated with that. And so really what we've done on Quarkus is we've actually thought about like, well, how should a Java environment be designed if it was to be favored or factored for the cloud for running on Kubernetes? So everything in Quarkus is about running in a cloud native environment. And so that means doing things differently. And that's why we have all those efficiency gains, both in JVM and native mode, is because we're actually optimizing your application for that runtime environment. And that is what we feel is the next generation of Java frameworks. And that's what we're trying to deliver to you in Quarkus. And so that includes being able to just type in a bunch of code, see it happen right away, and then literally hit one command, and then it pushes it straight up to Kube.
Yeah. And that's why we wanted it to be open and to be an ecosystem. So that's why there is this notion of an extension framework that people can write extensions on top of and add value to everybody here. So that's what we're giving to the world. It's essentially, we see the future of Java going that way, and we try to make as open a platform as we could, and within the architectural design that we feel are the way to the future.
Awesome.
All right, back to code.
Back to code, yes.
Yeah, while you guys were talking, and I just wanted to showcase what Emmanuel mentioned, like the -p native or d native. So with like one command, I just added this -d native flag, and then that created my native image, and I ran my native image, my native binary, and it started in 13 milliseconds. So the other thing with this Spring stuff, as is the same with all the other Quarkus stuff, is that the native image we create, and actually the Java jar we create, is optimized. The entire application is optimized. So, but by us being able to like know that this greeting here is what's actually been is going to be returned by your Spring controller. We know that like to interact with Jackson in the proper ways to make this work in the native image. And that is one thing that last time I checked, Spring wasn't what the Spring boot stuff that did crawl VM wasn't able to do. So you would have to essentially, the user has to tell it, give it extra information to make native work, depending on their application. On Quarkus, all this just works out of the box. So let's move forward and go ahead and like add a database or something like that, right? So I'll go ahead. Actually, let's add some cache first. Make this, because this is real quick. Let's go thread.sleep. I'll sleep here for like 4 seconds. And I'll go.
I'm hearing Clément having a heart attack. Since the ER right now.
Yeah, but everybody loves to do thread sleep in a demo, right?
I once saw in a open source project, I won't say what, a PR that was like, fix this problem, and it was thread sleep 1.
I've seen something like that in the Node ecosystem as well, right?
And to be fair, I've seen that in some of the Red Hat properties as well. So yeah, don't do that, people.
Yeah, don't do that. So I'm doing that. What I wanted to show here is basically, let's say like your greeting service is slow, right? For some reason, whatever. It calls out to like 5 external services or whatever. I just want to simulate that it's slow. And let's also take it a step further here and say, let's say, we'll give this string name, and I'll call this request param, and I'll say name and create name, and I'll go in here and say, oops, I'll add a name, string name, and I'll say hi name. Basically, yeah, what I'm doing here is that I'm trying to simulate a service that, like, you give it an input and it returns the same output every time. For the same input, it returns the same output. So it doesn't depend on anything else, but it takes a while. So this is like an ideal situation that you would want to cache, right? You don't want to wait 4 seconds to get the same response every time. So what we could do in this case is use the Spring cache annotations. So obviously Quarkus has its own caching layer, and we have the Spring Quarkus, the Spring annotation, Spring cache extension that builds on that to provide cache functionality. So you could go ahead and use your own, like, cacheable, I think that's what it's called, yeah. So you can use the cacheable annotation from Spring, and you tell it, like, which cache to use, in this case the greeting cache, and it will use the parameter name, hopefully, to cache it on our second request. So if I go hello Geo, it'll still take like 4 seconds the first time. If I do it the second time, it's instantaneous because it got it from the cache. If I go hello George, again, 4 seconds, blah, 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 and second time instantaneous. So you can use Quarkus cache annotations if you want, but if you already know the Spring caching annotations, you can just go ahead and use them to make situations like these, where annotations actually make sense, to cache your stuff, to make them a whole lot easier. And okay, next thing we want to show real quick. I do see we're kind of running out of time here. Next point is that obviously, like, when I was working with Spring and my previous jobs, I almost, like, by default, when I was using a relational database, I almost always use Spring Data JPA. I thought that was like a good API that covered, that actually made, like, the typical use cases super easy to use. It might not, like, scale super well when our queries became complex and stuff like that, and the domain model, like, expanded, but for the basic use cases, it got you off the ground really, really, really quick. So we implemented that. Basically what we do here is that after we add Spring Data JPA extension and JDBC driver, and I think I have Postgres running.
But by the way, let me stop you for a sec. There is 12 minutes before we go dark. If you have any questions around the Spring usage, please shoot the questions. If you already are using it, just let us know. If you're interested, that's why you're joining that call. Let us know as well. It would be interesting to get feedback and give it back to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Rostislav was just asking for Quarkus newbies, when is it worth starting with Spring APIs on top of Quarkus?
Oh, well, I think it's what John said earlier, right? If you already know Spring and you're really comfortable with that, and you don't, like, know any Jakarta, Java E, Jakarta APIs like JAX-RS or stuff like that, then it probably makes sense to start with Spring. What do you think, John?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, that's it. I mean, if you wanted to, you could start with the Spring APIs if you want to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone and learn both ecosystems. But yeah, generally it's targeted for people that are trying to pick up Quarkus that already know Spring. But either way works.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of cool too, is you can sort of do it over time if you want. Like you could pull in Spring APIs and then decide, you know what, I prefer this other API, and it's not a big deal. You just add a few. You can mix them together. So you just add a few classes and use that. Whichever works better for you.
Actually, one quick point I wanted to bring up is, while we're talking about picking up Spring from a programming model perspective and developing Spring apps, one of the things we haven't necessarily talked about is running Quarkus in a Spring environment, right, at runtime. And so one of the things that we've been doing is, and you haven't showed it, Georgios, and maybe we won't have time, but like at Spring properties, right, and support for the Spring config server. right? So the idea is that if you have a Spring environment, you can actually take Quarkus, use a Spring config client, Spring config server client, and apply that, and then drop it into a Spring environment. And I think there's a Redis extension now as well if you already have Redis in your environment, etc. Anyway, I'll go back on mute.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time to show it, but that's an excellent point, because like most people don't have like green field applications. They have like brown field applications they want to run in some environment. So yeah, that's exactly what the Spring Cloud Config Server gives you, right? You have your config server running somewhere, and you want your application to be configured by pulling properties from that server. And that's exactly what the Spring Cloud Config extension does. Spring Cloud Config extension does, which we have our guide here. It has all the information. But like John said, you could also use Consul. So I think we have Quarkus Consul extension, which is the same idea. Basically, you pull properties from Consul at runtime. Consul is a product from HashiCorp that a lot of folks use for runtime configuration. Then exactly, you can pull it from Redis because we have a Redis client. So basically, yeah, a thing that we have addressed lately is like trying to fit your Quarkus application into running environments. So like and like the show you had last week, right? Which is pretty much the same idea. The show you had last week where you had Aaron and Ken were showing that I want to create metrics, but I want them to automatically work with the dashboards my organization already has. So yeah, I'll use the micrometer extension for that. So same idea here with like the properties stuff.
So we got another question that came in, Georgios, which is it possible to create a request scoped custom bean validator in newer versions of Quarkus?
Request scope custom bean validator. I think it should be. We should probably ask Guillaume to be. He's on PTO, but yeah, he would know for sure. But I don't see why not. I mean, I can't think of a reason why that would not work. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that would work. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, we've been expanding the validation support. Like we recently just added support for using Validator in reactive contexts.
Yes.
So it should be working across the board, but we may have missed something.
I'm interested in your use case though, because they tend to be. Yeah, what's your use case, Tarcisio? Sorry about butchering your name. Because they tend to be somewhat static, ideally, from a state point of view, those validations. So I guess you're looking to have a per user state for your validation somehow.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Plus it's request scope. So like you would validate the same, like depending on the second time you validate the same stuff, you want to do something different. Yeah, I'm missing the use case.
Yeah, let's if you can reach out to us like on the Quarkus Dev mailing list or the Quarkus Zulip chat, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was making assumptions. I was assuming that like you would carry state between validation operations of some sort, but I admit I don't really know. Well, one thing that's cool is we have another interesting question, which is it's not going to fit on the screen here, so you guys have to look in the chat to see it, but it's a general question about Quarkus, which is how would you advise teams that are afraid of trying out Quarkus and moving to production with that? Which I think is a really great question. I don't think we've talked about that enough on the show. I'm sure John's got a lot to add on to this one, but a big recommendation I would have is we've been adding some customer user success stories to the Quarkus website that you could check out and learn more about how those teams were successful. We have a fireside chat with one of them that is also a really cool example to look at. And then
we're gonna have them on this video stream as well sometime in the future, hopefully.
Excellent. John, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so I just pasted a link to the user stories if you want to maybe put that one up.
Sure.
That just shows where you can go take a look at what people are already doing in production, right? And these are some pretty business critical situations. I think one of the best user stories to read, and it's also a Quarkus Insight episode, is what Vodafone Greece has done with running Spring in their production environment for what is a pretty important application. So definitely take a look. And I think one of the things early on, even Emmanuel, that you brought up is the fact that Quarkus is really based on very mature technology. So it's not like we've started from scratch and implemented everything from scratch, right? You got Hibernate, you got Vertex, things that are already battle proven in production. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and for some reason, John, I didn't get your link. I can set it to a caption if you want to.
Oh, it's in, I did the YouTube chat.
Ah, okay, yeah. For some reason, it didn't show up. I have to look why that is. Well, in any case, yeah. So check out the user stories and see how other environments are using it, and feel free to jump onto our. We have a Zulip channel that you can get to by if you look at the Get Involved area of the website. There's a place where you can go and you can ask questions, and there are some other users who are on there, and if you happen to catch them when they're online, you may be able to ask them questions as well. You know, in general, like John was just talking about the mature technologies. You know, all these different projects have been around for a very long time, and they all have respective communities as well. And I think you can sort of look at it and evaluate that application. I'd highly recommend doing a prototype for you know, what you'd expect to see and compare it. Just compare it to what the other frameworks are that are out there and what you're currently using. And I think you'll find that you can, you know, receive a lot of gains, especially if you're deploying to the cloud, and receive a much better user experience and then a better productivity experience as well.
Actually, I thought of another thing to bring up, Jason, and it's around native images, right? When we were talking about, you know, the performance of the JVM, and that's what most today are using in production. But one of the barriers to production for native is getting support for native images, right? And I'm talking about production support. So I'm not intending this to turn this into a product discussion, but relatively soon, right? With Mandrill, we haven't really talked about Mandrill at all, but right, we'll have the ability to put native images in production with full support from Red Hat. So that's the end, you know, end marketing there.
Okay, Georgios, we only got about 2 minutes left. Is there any quick things you wanted to show? And then I'll kind of turn it to everybody for sort of last comments.
Right, I probably I could probably get it done in like 1 minute, the Spring Data stuff, but it probably doesn't make sense. What I wanted to show is like, if I had done the whole demo, like added security and added Spring Data JPA and everything else, I would have created the native image using the command I showed earlier. This would have been it. This Quarkus Spring demo runner thing. So it's 70 megabyte. We have Spring Data JPA, Spring Web, Spring Cache, Spring Security. So all that stuff. Native image, 79 megabyte. And if I run it, Spring runner, it would start in 11. Oh, sorry, not the target. That's the wrong one. This is the right one. And it would start in, this says 70 milliseconds. If I try it again, 30 milliseconds. So depending on the content, so you have all this stuff. You have caching, you have Hibernate, you have Spring Data, you have security, all this stuff, and it would start in 30 milliseconds. So I think that's where I wanted to leave it with regards to native image.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for commenting. Let me just turn around and see if there's any last comments from our panel today. You guys have any last thoughts you want to add?
No, it's funny. So I feel almost frustrated, like that we go like deeper into the concrete of Spring. So because we goofed around with the Java versions earlier, and then we had more like a higher level philosophical questions. So people tell us if you want to just have a super deep dive on that technology as a follow up. You know, I'm sure Georgios will be happy to go for that, and we'll just shut up and make it do the show for once.
Yeah, I think a good spring part 2 sounds useful.
Yeah, anything our viewers want to see, then yeah, we're definitely up to it.
Yeah, and I've created in my GitHub repo, and this is not intended to be an advertisement. Jay Klingon, I actually do play around a lot with using Quarkus with Spring API. So setting up the Spring config server and using it, I have a repo on that. Trying to mix and match. I play around with mix and matching microprofile and Spring technologies. I have a repo on that. It's a lot of date. I need to update it, but there's a few Spring related things that go above and beyond what are in the quick starts. So if you want to take a look.
Awesome. And as always, remember, you can contact us through the website. We also follow Stack Overflow questions. So there's a lot of ways in which you can get in touch with the Quarkus developer team. We're here to help you guys be successful. Whatever phase you're looking at, if you're just looking at Quarkus, just trying to learn more about it. If you're actually going to be putting it into production, whatever help you guys need with, just ping us and we're here to help you out.
Yeah, or give us feedback about so we've been into quite a lot of teams, and sometimes they were like just wanted to be pushed a nudge to use Quarkus. Others were more like the rebellion was fighting the empire kind of model. So we have a lot of experience to exchange on the technology and see the merits and then let the team make their choice, right? So just if you feel some resistance and want a conversation around some of the key arguments, like go to Zulip or the mailing list. We'll be happy to tell us how we go about those arguments.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of your day, whether that's morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time zone you currently happen to be in.
Your time.
Yes.
It's 11 p.m. in Tokyo. That's what,
yes.
what I heard.
Yeah, I saw the comment. Watching from a bar. Excellent idea, guys. Keep that one up. Especially love the questions that might flow out of that.
Hey, let's present from a bar.
Oh, now you're talking. Yes. Quarkus on tap.
Not the fake one, guys. Just make it real.
Yeah. All right,
anyway,
guys.
You don't have to drink alcohol. You can go for soft drinks. It works too. It's just a relaxed mood.
Yes. Soft drinks with a little bit of rum.
All right. Time to cut the show.
Yes. Okay. See you guys later. Have a great day. Thanks for coming
everybody.
and join us next time for the next episode of Quarkus Insights.